You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
This episode is brought to you by DRMS, a trusted provider of dairy information and decision tools. As a nonprofit with deep ties to NC State and Iowa State universities, we've spent over 65 years serving the dairy industry, delivering research-backed software, standardized data, and exceptional customer support. Our dedicated team works alongside producers and consultants to ensure they get the training, tools, and insights they need. We turn complex herd data into clear, actionable insights that help producers and consultants make informed decisions every day through solutions built in collaboration with the dairy industry. Learn more at drms.org.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are in your day, welcome to the Dairy Voice podcast by Dairy Business News. I'm your host, Connie Kuber, with Sealpro Silage Barrier Films by Conner Agriscience. Thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. Before we get started, I always keep in mind that we have listeners who are not part of the dairy industry, and we appreciate you learning about the great lengths the dairy industry goes to educate and to share information that benefits not only the cattle we manage, but the people who consume our products, and that's you. Thank you for listening. Today, we're going to talk about something that's getting a lot of attention for its health benefit potential, and that's whole milk. Maybe we've learned that dairy fat isn't such a bad thing after all. Many think that whole milk tastes actually better. So my guest today is Dr. Chris Cifelli from Dairy Management Inc.'s National Dairy Council. Welcome, Chris, to the Dairy Voice podcast. Tell us about your background and how you came to this point in your career.
Hi, Connie. Thanks for having me today. My path to nutrition was, like probably most of ours, not very linear. I actually wanted to be a medical doctor. And fate would have it that it took me to graduate school at Penn State. So I'm originally from out east in the Philadelphia area. Just fell in love with nutrition science and had the opportunity to meet another Penn State alum, Dr. Gregory Miller, who a lot in the dairy industry know was lead of National Dairy Council for a number of decades. And one thing led to another, and I joined DMI, National Dairy Council, in January of 2008. So I'm finishing up my 18th year, proudly serving U.S. dairy farmers and championing for the health benefits of milk, cheese, yogurt, and other dairy products.
Well, that's interesting. So no milking cows when you're growing up or any of that kind of thing?
No, to be honest, the first time I was in a farm was when I did my orientation here at DMI, and it was a really eye-opening experience. I think in graduate school we had to take agriculture courses, and you just kind of get through them, and you don't have an appreciation really, especially someone growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, how your food is produced, what it really takes to put milk, meat, produce on the table every day. And, I think one of the things that when I go back and talk with students now and in the nutrition field and others, I encourage them to kind of really go step on a farm, take those ag courses seriously and learn, because it's such a key component of as we try to help people eat better and choose healthier products. You got to know where your food's coming from and why you should make those choices as well.
Well, let's jump in. Can you give us a better understanding real briefly of the National Dairy Council, the work that you do there, and how your work connects to dairy farmers' priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, one I get quite frequently. National Dairy Council, a lot of people will be surprised to know it's been around for over 100 years, and it's always been rooted in science. One of its first, how it really came to being was professor at the University of Wisconsin, E.V. McCollum, was studying rickets back in the early 1900s and realized that vitamin D was a key deficiency that people had in that disease. And he also understood that dairy foods were high in a lot of the calcium, potassium, protein, and other bone building nutrients. And he suggested and encouraged that fortification of milk with vitamin D be done to help eradicate rickets, and it really did. It really helped eliminate that, and that was really the genesis of National Dairy Council, was that farmers' understanding of science, their belief in science, their funding of science, and then the education and outreach that kind of comes with that established that. And here we are, 100 and some years later. 110 years later, and I'm proud to kind of now, champion the work that was started all those decades ago, and to carry on the legacy of doing sound research to understand the health and wellness benefits of dairy foods.
We know that whole milk is a topic of interest to dairy farmers. I hear that all the time. How much research has been done and has focused on whole milk and whole milk dairy foods, and what sort of consensus has been reached?
Not too long ago, when I was, still in grad school 20 years ago, we were all taught and, believed that saturated fat was, detrimental to our health. And I think what's happened is, as science has gotten better and as we've learned to think about foods slightly differently, we're understanding that the effects of the fat in foods really depend on the food itself, the matrix that the food is delivered in. In terms of National Dairy Council, in the last 2 decades, we have funded and published over 80 research studies on the health effects of whole milk dairy foods. Most of these focused on how full-fat dairy, whole milk dairy impacts heart health. And these studies, along with hundreds of other non-farmer funded studies, have shown that delicious, nutrient-rich dairy foods support heart health. They can make you feel fuller as well because of the protein in them. And studies have consistently shown that they can help lower blood pressure. So the takeaway I kind of give people is, if you love full fat dairy, go for it. As part of a healthy eating pattern and lifestyle, it's going to contribute to overall health and wellness.
Who has been doing this research and what has been found?
As a checkoff organization, we do very little research in-house. So most of what we fund is through at university settings or hospitals as well. So we have a competitive research program similar to the USDA or NIH, where we solicit proposals. Those are reviewed by external experts, for their scientific merit. We fund the ones that are both scientifically sound and kind of aligned with our program goals, which I can talk about in a moment. What's been found is, just to kind of give you a couple of the highlights, whole milk yogurt has been linked with lower risk for type 2 diabetes. In fact, yogurt is really cool in the sense that last year in March of 2024, it became the first food to get a FDA qualified health claim for reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes. So strong scientific evidence there. Cheese, which we know is delicious. It makes everything taste better, but has been criticized for, its fat content. We've shown that and others that it's been linked with better heart health, so lower risk for things like cardiovascular disease and stroke. And milk, whether you're talking whole, reduced fat, lactose free, they all provide the same 13 essential nutrients, and they've been linked with better bone health and a lower risk of blood pressure. So the evidence is clear. Most U.S. adults don't consume the recommendations, which are 3 servings of dairy foods a day. Everybody's falling about a serving and a half short. So even one more cup of yogurt, one more serving of cheese, one more cup of milk is going to close nutrient gaps and help improve your overall health.
With over 85 projects, California Bioenergy is without a doubt one of the leading developers of anaerobic digesters for dairy farms in the United States. Since 2006, CalBio has been forming successful partnerships with dairy farmers to create digesters that are built to last. Our CalBio team has the expertise to help lead you through the entire development process. From project design and engineering to credit generation and the day-to-day operations. With subsidiaries in the Northwest, Midwest, and Southwest, CalBio is ready to partner with dairy farmers across the country. Learn more at calbioenergy.com.
And I would think that full fat recommendation goes along with sticking to the servings and not having 6 cups of cheese versus 3.
For sure. Yeah. My grandmother said anything good in too much is not good for you.
Right.
And there's always trade-offs. Yeah, and you're right. There is, whole milk has just naturally more calories than a lower fat variety. So you do have to make some trade-offs, and there's easy ways to kind of do that in the day while staying within your caloric limits recommendations, but enjoying whole milk. For me personally, I really enjoy, especially this time of year, like a pumpkin spice latte on the weekends, so then I have to make other concessions in my day because I'm willing to have that added sugar for that delicious kind of thing in my venti latte, and that just means there's something else that I have to eat less of. But whenever you're choosing nutrient-rich foods, you really can't go wrong. So swapping those for things that are less nutrient dense is a good way to kind of improve health pretty easily.
I wondered if this research breaks consumers into groups for analysis. And for instance, I have a young granddaughter. Well, she's not an infant anymore, but she's to the toddler stage, and she's eating whole fat yogurt. Is there different recommendations through your research for different ages of people?
As a checkoff organization, we follow what the U.S. dietary guidelines recommend, and currently they're being revised right now because every 5 years they go under review. The current recommendations are that you can have full-fat dairy products, cheese and yogurt as you wean to 12 months of age. From 12 to 24 months, that first year of life, you can have full-fat dairy products, whole milk, cheese and yogurt. And then after the current recommendations are for low-fat and fat-free. As we talked about earlier, there's a lot of science that has evolved. Part of how we disseminate our science is through public comments and oral testimony to bodies such as the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, where we help explain the science and provide them with references. And we're waiting to kind of see how they view that science and what their new recommendations will be, which we anticipate before the end of the year. And I think it's really important, Connie, just to note for your listeners that we're not allowed to lobby. We're not allowed to influence in any way, shape, or form. We're a research, education, and promotion organization, so we feel strongly about the science. There's, as I said, 80 studies in the last 20 years, and then a lot of non-farmer studies. And, we're hopeful that the dietary guidelines will take that into consideration when making their new recommendations this year.
I'm curious, when the National Dairy Council conducts research, how is it shared?
Probably as important as doing the studies themselves.
Right.
The science doesn't do any good if it just sits on a bookshelf in a dusty library on a university campus. So there's several ways we kind of activate it. As I mentioned, I lead the research team at National Dairy Council. I have a counterpart, Dr. Katie Brown, who leads kind of our nutrition affairs team. So between the two of our groups, we're constantly activating the science and kind of getting it out there. And I can give some examples. On our side of the house, one of the key ways we do it is presenting the science at universities, major nutrition conferences, by writing opinion pieces and perspective pieces, engaging in scientists and kind of talking to them. Through Katie Brown's team, she works a lot with health professional organizations. So think American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and educates them on the health and wellness. So we're able to reach scientists, we're able to reach health professional organizations, and then very importantly is the consumers as well. I have had the privilege and opportunity to do several podcasts, trying to get in things like men's health and different things, and recently trying to get more active in things like LinkedIn to kind of tell the good news about dairy foods and that. So we have a whole communications group that will take our science, help make it a little more understandable for the consumer, and then get it to them as well. So I'd say a good portion of our job is taking, packaging and helping people understand what milk, cheese, yogurt, whey, casein, and all the other amazing dairy products do for their health.
I'm curious, what is their reaction? What is your audience's reaction to all this information?
When you talk about whole milk, it's been fascinating. I think, as I said, when I started in nutrition and, you were learning it, there weren't a lot of openness to the idea that the fat in dairy could be different because of the dairy matrix. And I think now over time, you're starting to see more and more people kind of understand that. For consumers, I think a lot of them grew up seeing the milk mustache or maybe understanding that milk was good for their bones, helps make strong bones, and are surprised to learn about the benefits for, say, blood pressure and type 2 diabetes and weight management and just myriad of stuff that dairy foods do because of its nutrients and its inherent health benefits. So sometimes you get a aha, or I didn't realize that. And I think really importantly, Connie, is we try to dispel a lot of myths.
Sure.
A really good example is, a lot of people are concerned about chronic inflammation throughout their body, and all kinds of different foods and diets that say you avoid this and avoid that because, keep your inflammation low. And dairy sometimes gets lumped into them. And that's a myth out there, that actually yogurt will help reduce chronic inflammation. We've shown it in clinical trials to do so. And a lot of other studies have shown that milk, cheese, and yogurt don't enhance inflammation. So as important it is about talking about the health benefits of dairy, it's just as important to kind of dispel some people's myths about what it could be doing to their body and helping them understand and see the science.
With all this, what is on the horizon for National Dairy Council? What comes next?
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be researching the health benefits of milk, cheese, and yogurt and their ingredients. So, the centerpiece of what's next is the gut.
Yeah.
So thinking about when I was in graduate school, we thought about our digestive system simply as that, as the mechanism for breaking down foods, absorbing those foods, and turning them into the different building blocks and energies and nutrients that we need. Shock some people who are listening to this that your digestive system, your gut, your intestines is home to 70% of your immune cells. It's actually the largest immune organ in the body. Have you ever had a gut feeling, Connie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there is something called the vagus nerve that runs from your gut directly to your brain, and we now know that the gut and brain are talking, and so the gut also has, outside the central nervous system, the most neurons in the body. We're starting to learn that gut is not just barrier to the outside world and also something. It is a organ that is contributing to stress. It is helping to manage immunity and defenses. It's connected to the liver, so things like glucose, and how your body's regulating blood sugar are directly tied to it. And that's not even counting the whole microbiome that we now know inhabit the inside of the intestinal tract that also is contributing to health. So this is going to be a key research area for us. Our team, the innovation team that I fall under, has invested in consumer science to understand what those benefits that consumers are looking for from food and beverages, and a lot of them tied to the gut. So stress, anxiety, satiety, feeling fuller longer, feeling more alert, calmness, maintaining blood glucose levels, all those things kind of tie to our digestive system. And the good news is dairy's already at a really amazing place to kind of start there. As I mentioned, yogurt supports gut health.
Right.
Cheese is also fermented, so we're wanting to study how cheese maybe mimics or does the same thing yogurt does as a fermented food. We know the high protein content, a good quality protein that is present in milk, cheese, and yogurt can support satiety and help people feel fuller longer. I know your listeners can't see me. I'm smiling ear to ear because as a scientist and somebody who loves research, it's a great time, and just feel really strongly that dairy is going to have a great story here because of its uniqueness in the nutrients it has and the bioactives it has, and just the variety of dairy. I mean, it's so amazing when you think about all the culture products and then milk and then I could go on and on. I will say just real quick, Connie, I'm so excited. Bioactives are another part we're really trying to understand. Is we know there's unique bioactive compounds in dairy foods that can impact health, and we want to understand them better as well. So we focused a lot in nutrition science on vitamins, minerals, proteins, carbs, as we should. Now we're understanding there's other key things in there that are also impacting health. So I'd say between the gut and the bioactives, that's, if you have me on again in a year, that's probably where I'll want this conversation to kind of focus.
Get your Sealpro silage barrier film today. Protect the seed, fertilizer, labor, and expensive inputs that you've invested in. Choose best-in-class Sealpro now in 3 different versions: traditional 2-roll application, our new co-rolled application, and super simple and wildly successful 1-layer film, Sealpro 1. It's easy to buy, easy to use. Contractor covering? We'll work with them. Learn more at sealprosilage.com. That's SEALPRO silage.com. Family owned and operated for over 25 years. 559-779-5961. That's 559-779-5961. Can you define what a bioactive is?
It's a compound that would be found in any food ingredient or that isn't a vitamin or mineral, so it doesn't have like a defined amount you have to consume for health, but directly impacts some function of the body. I think a good example is lactoferrin. So lactoferrin is a protein that's found in milk, and it binds iron and helps regulate iron homeostasis, also helps with immune function. But there's no recommendation for it, but we know it's important for health.
That'll be exciting. I do hear a lot about the gut health and how it makes a difference throughout the whole body. And it's just fascinating. So that'll be interesting. I'd love to have you back on and hear what you've got going. So what else should farmers know about the work of National Dairy Council?
We are so appreciative of the farmers for their support of DMI and National Dairy Council and research. I represent the nutrition research team. We have a whole product science team as well that is kind of understanding and unlocking ways to kind of make dairy either safer or enriched bioactives in there and all kinds of cool stuff. So first of all, a big thank you to the farmers for their 110-year plus support of research. And I think, they should know that, we're not resting on our laurels with that. We're not content just to kind of understand how milk and dairy products impact bone health. While that's extremely important, we want to unlock all the ways that milk, cheese, and yogurt can kind of impact human health from childhood all the way through healthy aging and ensuring that people can live long, healthy lives and do all the things that they want to do. So it's a very exciting time. We always top of mind with their money, ensuring that the work we do is of the highest quality, that it's all published. That's I think a key thing. Nothing we do is hidden. Everything has to be published and presented. So it's a transparent process, and that really science is the foundation for all the messaging they see from the different dairy organizations, all the stuff on packages. It has its roots in National Dairy Council, has a you can kind of all tie it back to their investment in science to be able to say, wow, this is really good for you. I just want to reiterate, how unique milk is. I get the question a lot, what dairy product should I eat? And I always give the same answers. Which one do you enjoy? Mm-hmm. There's yogurt and then Greek yogurt if you want a higher protein. There's different cheeses. There's, as I mentioned, lactose-free, whole milk all the way down. They all have the same nutrients. There's cottage cheese, as you mentioned. Dairy is so awesome, and leave anybody is just find a way to get one more serving in your day. Mix some yogurt into something, a little cottage cheese. We've done a study where people met recommendations for dairy. So again, it's 3 servings for adults, and most people are at 1.5. It could reduce healthcare costs in the billions of dollars just through the nutrients. So it's such a simple thing for consumers and people to do. I think they're coming back to dairy. They're realizing, how natural and healthy it is. So choose the dairy you love and enjoy it and eat it and get your 3 servings.
Are there any websites or ways to get information that you would recommend?
For the farmers listening today, dairycheckoff.com is a great resource for them to kind of understand how their checkoff dollars work for them. If you're interested in more, some of the health and wellness benefits, and we have a lot of science summaries and booklets that again we work with Katie Brown's team on, and other information on just dairy and health and other topics that our DMI works on, is you can go to usdairy.com.
usdairy.com. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate the time today. We've been talking with Dr. Chris Cifelli from Dairy Management Inc.'s National Dairy Council. So as we head into the winter months here and open up those silage piles and bunkers that you just got done making, please stay safe. Get yourself some safety cones and mark the no-go line 3 times the height away from a silage pile from the face, keeping your family, employees, and people like me away from danger. Sorry, I had to just plug that in because safety is a big deal to my company and to me. I'm Connie Kuber with Sealpro Silage Barrier Film by Connor AgriScience. You've been listening to the Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News. Please subscribe, like, and share this podcast. And thanks again, Chris, for sharing all this great information today. And I can't wait to have you again next year.
Thanks, Connie. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.